All right, we learned about the male reproductive system. Now let's learn the anatomy of the female reproductive system. So here is, again, a cross-section through the body so that we can see all the structures. And notice that the reproductive structures have been highlighted here, okay? And we've got the labia on the outside, the vagina, the uterus, the fallopian tube, and the ovary. Notice also that the urinary bladder sits in front of and under the uterus. This is why pregnant women have to pee all the time, because there's literally someone sitting on their bladder. So please be patient with pregnant women. Also, the urinary bladder has a urethra, which is the tube that releases urine to the external environment. Notice the urethra is not shared by the reproductive system in the human female. The vagina and the urethra are separate tubes. Please do not get them confused. Also, in the back, we have the rectum leading to the anus. Also, don't confuse this one with either the vagina or the urethra. If you get lost on an exam and you don't know, you forget what you're doing, the uterus is connected to ovaries, and it has this dome-like extension called the cervix, okay? The urinary bladder doesn't have anything like the cervix, and it has a very narrow tube, the urethra, leading to the outside. And also this thin layer of muscles right here, that's the sphincters that control flow of urine to the outside environment. All right, so make sure you keep those straight, and please don't mix them up. All right, pet peeve. This tube is called a vagina. The vagina is not this fleshy material that you can see from outside. This stuff is called the vulva. Please don't call it the vagina. The vagina is this tube. It's inside the body. It cannot be seen from the outside without holding the labia apart. These folds of tissue, the labia majora, the labia minora, and the little clitoris right there, yes, that all makes up the vulva. So I don't care what a woman is wearing. You cannot see her vajayjay. You may see her vulvae, possibly labebe, but you cannot see her vagina. So please stop saying that. Use the right terminology. No, you can't just decide that you don't like that terminology and change it. This is the vagina. Get used to it. Let's move on now. All right, let's start with the tissues outside the body, the ones that make up the vulva. The outermost folds of tissue are called the labia majora. Labium major is singular. These are homologous to the scrotum. Remember, we covered that in the male lecture, which means that they develop from the same fetal tissue as the scrotum in the male. These are thick pads of tissue with skin and covered with hair, and then they pull apart to reveal the labia minora, which are much thinner folds of tissue that have lots and lots of blood vessels, lots of nerve endings. These are very, very sensitive, and also have mucus cells that provide lubrication. Between the anterior, or in the front side, folds of the labia minora is the clitoris. The clitoris is homologous to the penis of the male. Just like the penis, the clitoris has a glans at the tip, a shaft, and a root. It has a prepuce, which is the little fold of skin that covers the clitoris. It is protected between the labia minora. It is an erectile body. So if you want to please a woman, please get to know the clitoris. Most women actually can't reach orgasm by vaginal penetration alone. They need clitoral stimulation. You're welcome. All right, now moving on to the vagina itself. The vagina is about 10 centimeters long, not quite 5 inches long. It's about the same length as the average human penis, and it does extend up into the body. It functions as the birth canal, and it does not need to be cleaned out. Please do not douche. Do not put any foreign fluids in there to clean. The vagina is self-cleaning. If you are curious about that or want to know anything else about the vagina or the rest of the female reproductive system, please read this book, The Vagina Bible by Dr. Jen Gunter. She is absolutely amazing. And this book is just packed full of really easy to read and understand information about the female reproductive system. So please, I recommend this one highly. All right, so that's the vagina. It leads from the outside, and the external is covered by these folds. These are the labia minora. And then the orifice is often protected by a layer of tissue called the hymen, which looks like this. There are lots of different shapes and sizes of hymen. Sometimes they have a bunch of little holes. Sometimes there isn't any hole. That's going to cause problem when a girl starts menstruating. The hymen is sometimes broken during a woman's first sexual intercourse, and this is what a hymen looks like after it's been broken. It may be broken at another time, either by masturbation, tampon use, horseback riding, bike riding, gymnastics, a weird fall. There are a number of ways that a hymen can be broken besides sexual intercourse. Now, why do we care? Because breaking the hymen does produce a small amount of blood, which is where the delightful phrase breaking her cherry or popping her cherry comes in, because when a woman first has sex, often there's a little bit of bleeding. Looks like cherry juice, whatever. Anyway, please don't use that phrase. Some girls are born without a hymen, so they won't bleed. And some girls have already broken their hymen before they have sex, so not everybody bleeds on their first time. So that doesn't mean she's not a virgin, not that it's anybody's dang business whether she is a virgin, but anyway, that's a thing. All right, so that's the hymen. That's at the outer end of the vagina. The inner end of the vagina ends at this dome-shaped projection, which leads to this narrow canal, and this whole thing is called the cervix. And the cervix is the opening to the uterus. The cervix also has a bunch of mucus-creating glands, and they produce a thick plug, a mucus plug, that seals this opening, probably made as a barrier to prevent any pathogens from entering the uterus when a woman is not ovulating. At the time of ovulation, when a woman could get pregnant, right before that, that mucus plug is shed. Even when it is there, it is probably not thick enough in most women to prevent sperm from swimming through. Remember that sperm swim. So please do be careful out there. Also, when the cervical plug is shed, a lot of women will notice that as like a thick sort of extra volume of vaginal excretion. That's perfectly normal, and it just usually signals that a woman will soon ovulate. Okay, now this is what the actual cervix looks like. You can see lots of mucus around it, and this is what a doctor sees when they do a pap smear. So in order to do a pap smear, which is to check for cervical cancer, The doctor puts a speculum into the vagina. This is what a speculum looks like here. Yes, it looks like a modern torture device, and honestly, it kind of feels like a modern torture device. The speculum holds the walls of the vagina open so that the doctor can insert this special brush, which scrapes cells from the cervix to test for possible cancer. This is what the cells are supposed to look like. This is abnormal cells. So you can see these cells look normal, and these are abnormal cervical cells. They've got 2 nuclei in them. The nuclei are much larger. The cells themselves have a different shape than they're supposed to. This is a sign that the woman could be developing cervical cancer. This isn't definitively cervical cancer. When this happens, when a woman gets an abnormal pap smear, usually the doctor will say, come back in a few months, we'll test again, and we'll see if we need to do anything further. The woman goes back, and many, many times there are no more abnormal cells found. The doctor says, you're fine, don't worry about it, come back again next year and we'll do another pap smear. And then the woman wonders, what? Was there nothing there to begin with? Like, why did you make me go through this? What has happened is actually that the woman's immune system has done its job. Your immune system doesn't only track down foreign pathogens, it also constantly monitors your own tissues to determine if there are abnormal cells developing in the tissues. And then special cells, white blood cells, for example, come along and break down these abnormal cells and then engulf the parts, get rid of them so that they can be replaced with normal cells. So that's a normal part of life that your immune system is doing constantly. And yes, you do have immune cells that are constantly patrolling your tissues to seek out abnormal cells and break those down. We actually think that most people develop cancer many, many times throughout their lives without ever getting cancer, meaning that they develop abnormal cells in their tissues and their immune system cleans it up and gets rid of it without anyone ever knowing about it. When a woman has an abnormal pap smear, it usually just means that the doctor happened to do a pap smear at the time that those abnormal cells were present. Now, why am I making such a big deal out of this? Because this is what insurance companies call a pre-existing condition. Yes, lovely phrase. If you have a pre-existing condition, it means that you are more likely to need to use your health insurance and therefore cost the insurance company money, and therefore they are going to charge you more for it. So other pre-existing conditions that are really common are things like asthma or high blood pressure. And just like, asthma can be controlled in most people very easily, insurance companies used to charge people extra if they had any kind of pre-existing condition. An abnormal pap smear is one of the most common pre-existing conditions in women, and you could be charged extra your whole life if you had had an abnormal pap smear when you were like in your 20s. It really didn't matter how long ago it was, or rather your immune system did its job and cleared it up very quickly. Doesn't matter. They would still charge you extra. And extra sometimes 10 times more than someone without a pre-existing condition. Why do I say used to? Because the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, required that insurance companies not charge people more if they had pre-existing conditions. The other side of that is that everybody would be required to have health insurance so that there would be lots of healthy people not using health insurance to offset the expense of people who do need to use their health insurance. That's how insurance works. That's how auto insurance works. Lots of people who don't get in accidents pay premiums so that, and all of those premiums cover payouts to the few people who do get in accidents. Why are we having this big discussion about health insurance as if it's some huge different thing? Well, because healthcare is expensive, and also because Republicans don't want people to get used to having good health insurance. They really rather prefer that we all pay a lot to private health insurance companies. I will step off that soapbox now. Anyway, that's what a pap smear is. Okay, so the pap smear is cells from the cervix. Remember, the cervix opens to the uterus. This is the uterus here. And the uterus is where a fetus will develop if a pregnancy is to occur. This fold of tissue here is a ligament that goes across the uterus and the ovaries and holds them all in place. As you can see, there's lots and lots of blood vessels going to the uterus, because if there is a pregnancy, the uterus is going to need to grow a lot to accommodate that pregnancy, and it's going to need a lot of blood flow to do that. The wall of the uterus is actually 3 different and distinct layers. The outer layer is called the perimetrium. Peri means around. So this is the layer that goes around the uterus. The next layer is the myometrium. Myo means muscle. So this is the muscle layer. It's actually muscle tissues going in 3 different directions that can really efficiently squeeze to eject the fetus from the uterus. Okay, I'm going to joke about fetuses being parasites. They act as a parasite on the mother because they get all of their nutrients from the mother, preferentially from the mother. They will take, for example, calcium from the mother's skeleton if mom doesn't get enough calcium in her diet. They're not actually parasites because a parasite has to be a different species, but in every other way, they're totally like parasites. I mean, they're cute and all, but they're parasites. Okay, the innermost layer is called the endometrium. Endo means inner. And this is the layer that becomes thicker during the menstrual cycle and then is shed when a woman menstruates. Not the whole layer, part of this layer actually sticks around, but the surface of this gets thicker, builds up, and then that part that built up is shed during menstruation. Finally, the ovaries are the actual reproductive organs, the gonads. They're little almond-sized organs. They're not very big, just the size of an almond. And they are connected to the uterus with this fallopian tube. They're actually connected with an ovarian ligament right here, but the egg has to go from the ovary through this fallopian tube around to the uterus there. These little finger-like projections are called fimbriae, and they wrap around the ovary, but they don't actually attach to the ovary. And their job is to catch an egg when it has been released from the ovary. The eggs themselves develop inside these multicellular structures called follicles. And they develop throughout the month, and then each month one follicle in one ovary erupts and releases an egg, and that process is called ovulation. And we used to think that it was like right ovary 1 month, left ovary the next month, and it turns out that most women are actually right ovary dominant, meaning that the right will release more often than the left. Why? Don't know. But that's a thing. So, it'll be like right, left, right, left, right, left. Why? Again, I don't know. That's just the thing. All right. So before we go to the menstrual cycle, let's just review really quickly. We have the ovary itself. It's the actual gonad where the eggs develop and that produces hormones. The fimbriae hang on to the ovary, catch the egg, The egg travels through the fallopian or uterine tube or oviduct to the uterus. The uterus has a 3-layer wall, an endometrium that builds up throughout the menstrual cycle and then is shed during menstruation. The myometrium, a muscle layer that thickens during pregnancy so that it can contract during childbirth to get the fetus out of the uterus. And then the perimetrium is this smooth outer layer, just kind of maintains the shape of the uterus. Then we have the cervix, which is the opening to the uterus, the vagina, the vaginal orifice is the outside layer. Let me go back to this. It opens to the labia minora, which also covers the urethra, which is the urinary tube that releases urine from the urinary bladder. Okay, the labia minora sit within the labia majora, and then the clitoris is right there, homologous to the penis, also an erectile organ or a erectile structure. And that is the female reproductive system. Stay tuned and we will do the menstrual cycle.